Part 65. A Middle School Cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 643. Although both readers and cartoonists were severely deceived by the sudden second knife of a certain middle-class cartoonist, and reluctantly watched the animation get stuck in key positions, but, a real man. Even if the animation does not reveal any information about the identity of the heroic spirits, as long as you continue to observe the comic series, you may not need to wait for a month to know in advance who the heroic spirits who come as servants are. Many of the readers who have been deceived by the animation have this idea, not only the readers, but also the good friends Ajoki Mumenha, who also belongs to the cartoonist side, and the silver-haired brother Fukuda also holds this idea. However, both the readers and the cartoonist side overestimated the integrity of a certain middle-class cartoonist, or, in other words, underestimated the consciousness of the cartoonist Hoinkuma called killing others for pleasure. In the next weekly comic series, the character heroic spirit, which is highly anticipated by readers, still does not appear. The content of the weekly comic series basically revolves around the story of a certain master. Whether it is the dark and depressing plot of the Matu family, or the many encounters of Weber who has the treatment of the protagonist must be ridiculed at the beginning, or the various stories of Sanmyo priest Koto Minkei worshipping under the magician family Tozaka Tokiomi. A kind of daily life, although the plot between several master characters supplements the main line of Holy Grail War, the really highly anticipated part of heroic spirits has been covered up very much by a certain middle-class cartoonist. Yan Shi, not a single bit was revealed in the serialized comics. Of course, compared to the extremely tangled reader side, the cartoonist side is slightly better, because it is also a cartoonist side with a certain second-grade cartoonist, whether it is the side of Aiken Mumenjai's good friend, or the silver-haired boy brother Fukuda can ask Makoto Takahashi on the phone to inquire about the follow-up plot and the heroic spirits that have not yet appeared. But compared to the uninformed readers, although the cartoonist side can contact Takahashi Makoto, he also knows the temperament of a middle-class cartoonist, so he called to inquire about the follow-up plot. Absolutely, it's a stupid act to send someone's head thousands of miles away. However, whether you are a cartoonist or a reader, sometimes you know that it is an act of seeking death, but you still do it. This is determined by human nature and has nothing to do with identity. Supreme, what did Mr. Fusion say? After watching his good friend put down the phone, the man with yellow-haired glasses immediately asked expectantly, "Have you found any news from Cheng?" No. Although Fusion-kun is also curious about the identity of the so-called heroic spirit, he did not call Aiken. After hesitating for a moment, Lan Dai sighed helplessly and suggested this to his good friend. "Hey, Chi-ren, I think you should give up. I also know that this is not good, but..." After pushing up his glasses, the yellow-haired glasses man leaned back and leaned on the chair and sighed helplessly, "But the problem now is that under the instigation of curiosity and knowledge under this, I have begun to gradually lose myself." Hey, Chi-ren, this statement is too exaggerated." Lan Dai glanced at the blank manuscript paper on his good friend's desk with squinted eyes, and complained with some dissatisfaction, "Speaking of Chi-ren, have you really thought about the follow-up plot of Chess Soul recently? Why do I have a bad feeling? I know, but now I can't write anything." After hearing the question from his good friend, the yellow-haired glasses guy silently pushed up his glasses, then immediately climbed onto the table, pulled his hair with both hands and let out a painful moan. The voice said, "All the thoughts in my mind now are centered around the follow-up plot of Fate and the heroic spirits that are about to appear. It's like being addicted. Cheng's new work, it's really poisonous. Although I have never seen a real case in reality, looking at my good friend's sometimes crazy and sometimes depressed behavior, Lande suddenly came up with the idea that drug addicts are almost like this. It's decided. I'm going to call and ask Aiken about the follow-up plot." Mr. Huang Mao Glasses explained the core idea of if you don't explode in silence, you will die in silence very well. Even if I was beaten so hard by Aiken, it's better to be ridiculed and humiliated than to endure the pain of waiting. After a moment of silence, ignoring the hint in his good friend's eyes that let's commit suicide together, Landais shook his head and sighed, since you have already decided, Chi-Ren, then I can only say, I wish you good luck in martial arts. Then. The patient with yellow hair and glasses had reached the limit of his waiting. Under the sympathetic and pitying eyes of his good friend, he finally couldn't help but broadcast the taboo phone call. I mean Cheng, in the Holy Grail War, which legendary existences did you choose to appear as heroic spirits? A certain yellow-haired glasses man finally asked Takahashi Makoto. Let's start the follow-up plot. Yes, in addition to satisfying my curiosity, more importantly, to relieve the obsession in my heart. After all, in the recent period, Mr. Huang Mao and Glasses has been too obsessed with the existence of heroic spirits, which has affected his creation of the comic Soul of Chess. Judging from the current progress of the animation, if you want to know the information about the appearance of heroic spirit, you will have to wait for at least a while. So you just wait patiently. In response to the question from a certain yellow-haired man with glasses, Takahashi Makoto on the other end of the phone curled his lips helplessly and sneered, for men, patience or endurance, isn't it a very important attribute? And you seem to have got the order wrong. Wrong, order. Concerned about the progress of the animation, hey, this is the crazy cartoonist Feng Guangai Yuan Kyoma. As if hearing the doubt in the words of the yellow-haired man with glasses, Takahashi Makoto immediately raised his voice and said unhappily, when the animation will be broadcast and what content it contains, these, have nothing to do with me? You asked the wrong person. Eh? But, isn't the animation adapted from your comic, Cheng? Comics are comics, animation is animation, tisk, this is basic common sense. Yellow-haired wife control gentleman, a certain Chuyuni cartoonist has taken the means of mutual shirking of responsibility in the workplace to the extreme. The animation production has been completely handed over to the Ogasa, so you should ask the four-eyed fox who controls everything about the timing and method of the appearance of heroic spirits in the animation. I am only responsible for the serialization of the comics, that's all. But the heroic spirits that appear in the animation should be consistent with the comics, right? Although a certain Chuyuni cartoonist shirked responsibility in various ways, a certain yellow-haired glasses gentleman still refused to give up. In this case, Aiken, you should know, Aiken, you must know it. So what? We are both competitors and partners in struggle. This logic of a certain yellow-haired glasses gentleman seems a bit magical. So, please tell me, Aiken. Please. I want to know the gap between us, how big is it? Just relying on the character setting, I was so curious that I couldn't even concentrate on creating my own comics. The reason why I was so persistent in wanting to find out information about comics or animations from Makoto Takahashi, in fact, fundamentally speaking, this is the real intention of the yellow-haired glasses man. Yada, but unfortunately, the yellow-haired glasses man is a wife control and not a cute girl, so Takahashi Makoto certainly refused to beg him. Although your sincere pleading makes me very happy, it still doesn't work. By the way, if you are really that curious, just wait for the comics to be serialized, or wait for a few more days for the animation to be broadcast, then you will know, right? Is it really necessary to know in advance like this? Well, of course. So because I am so curious. Yellow-haired glasses man, you started to sell your moral integrity when you failed to beg? Of course I still refuse, Takahashi Makoto interrupted the other party without any hesitation. After a moment of silence, a pleasant smile appeared on his face, and he changed his tone and suggested, but for the sake of you giving me pleasure, Mr. Yellow-haired glasses, how about a real sword fight with me? If you fight with me, I will tell you everything you want to know, how about it? Then I'd better wait obediently, faced with the challenge of a certain Chuyunibaku manga artist, After a long silence, Mr. Yellow-haired Glasses shamefully chose to escape, and ended the call by the way. Tisk, you keep saying you're curious, but you still don't have the guts. After hanging up the phone, Takahashi Makoto muttered in dissatisfaction, and then smiled at the customer in the headscarf in front of him. So, silver-haired boy, your choice is. Tisk. After the silver-haired boy Fukuda spat lightly, he moved his wrist and stared at Takahashi Makoto with a fierce look like a hungry wolf. Ah Cheng, I'm different from Yachin Mu Menjai and the others. Oh, your courage is commendable. But your strength, hee. Tisk, don't underestimate me, Shuyuni Makoto. Working overtime every day to write various materials, so even if a certain cat is leaving, you have to squeeze out the last value of use. Tisk, sorry, dear readers, the situation is so sad recently. So I guess I have to wait until I really leave to update and stabilize it. I'm really sorry. The above. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 644. I want to know the follow-up plot of Fate, and more specifically, I want to know the heroic spirit character who will appear next. I could just wait for the animation to play, or wait for the manga to be serialized. But there are always some people in the world who hope to know things in advance that they will know in the future by taking shortcuts or taking shortcuts. Of course, I don't want to deny anything, nor do I want to blame anything. I just feel that this kind of behavior, although it saves a lot of time and energy on the surface, actually still costs a lot of money, such as favors. Consumption, such as the consumption of money, also brings double trauma to the body and psychology. In a sense, this is probably equivalent exchange. As for the results obtained in exchange for the efforts, even if the parties involved cannot accept them, they do follow this truth. Just like the current silver-haired brother Fukuda, because he was eager to know the follow-up plot of Fate and eager to know the information about the character of heroic spirit, and he had neither the patience nor the heart to wait slowly, so he chose the most direct way. In this way, I accepted the proposal of a certain middle-class cartoonist who was full of pleasure, and had a brutal fight that might be called real sword victory. Therefore, from the perspective of the principle of equivalent exchange, the silver-haired guy's behavior was not wrong. But in this world, not everything revolves around someone, so the original destiny trajectory will not deviate or distort because of someone's will and determination. To put it simply, that is, after paying the price for some things, you will definitely get the corresponding results, but many times, human beings are always too greedy to accept it, that's all. As a crazy manga artist, Hohoin Kuma not only has extraordinary physical strength and is able to adapt to what is definitely a very long drawing job for most manga artists, but more importantly, a certain middle-class manga artist can also he has extraordinary combat power that is completely inconsistent with the profession of cartoonist. There has always been such a legend among cartoonists. Regarding such rumors, in fact, the silver-haired boy Fukuda didn't believe it at the beginning. After all, compared to myself, who looks like a bad boy, a certain middle school cartoonist wearing a white coat and an eye patch looks like he belongs to the bad camp, but his power to intimidate people is far greater. Not as good as the silver-haired brother Fukuda who is also a manga artist. However, the reality is just like what is described in the Nikisu novels. Inconspicuous passers-by are often martial arts masters with explosive fighting prowess, or just like Mr. Saitama set by a certain middle-class cartoonist in the comic One Punch Man. Marginal protagonists often have extraordinary fighting power that breaks through the sky, silently protecting the people and saving the earth from weirdos. So, after trying 27 times, the silver-haired boy Fukuda was still easily knocked down by a certain second-grade cartoonist. He finally realized that some of the news sometimes circulated among his colleagues might not just be legends, but also maybe it's true. Yeah, except for the witch's attribute restraint. Makoto Takahashi squatted next to the silver-haired brother Fukuda who was lying on the floor. His tone was full of helplessness. if you can defeat me in this world, in other words, the existence that kills me, is really just me. If it were normal times, the silver-haired brother Fukuda would have snorted with disdain, or made some silver-haired tsundere-type remarks, but today, he was knocked down by Makoto Takahashi after a whole day. After 17 times, no matter how much resentment and dissatisfaction the silver-haired boy had, he would not choose to complain at this time. After all, the silver-haired boy Fukuda is a cartoonist, not a complainer. Rather than using his life to complain about something, it is more practical to work hard to complete the manga. Ah! Silver-haired brother, are you leaving? I mean Aiken, what else do you want? Looking at a middle-level cartoonist blocking his way at this moment, the silver-haired boy Fukuda sounded unhappy. After all, he was just here to find out the follow-up plot, but he didn't expect it. But he would be knocked down 27 times in a row. Although there is also a reason why the silver-haired brother Fukuda committed suicide. Although there is room for improvement in terms of military force, the courage to challenge the strong is still worthy of commendation. Ignoring the hateful gaze of the silver-haired Hikaru Fukuda as he stood up, Takahashi Makoto gave a thumbs up and smiled, and it's rare. The king of Black Flame is also here, so, do you want to have dinner together? Not only does he have the demon talent in comics, but his cooking skills are not inferior to those of professional chefs. Recalling another legend about a certain middle-class cartoonist, the silver-haired brother Fukuda fell silent. Oh, Mr. Fukuda, let me tell you, Mr. Phoenixon's food is amazing. Eiji, who had just watched the whole process of 27 ways to bring down the silver-haired brother Fukuda, didn't look like a passerby at all at this moment. Consciously and without any embarrassment, he made an extremely embarrassing proposal to the silver-haired brother Fukuda. Let alone Takahashi Makoto, how can any cartoonist be so violent? Before, he put me down mercilessly, and now he actually invited me to have dinner together. Takahashi Makoto won't say it anymore. After all, the way of thinking of a middle-class cartoonist is not something that mere humans can understand. But even Eiji, the new wife, is like this. The passers-by who had been watching just now actually acted like a certain middle school cartoonist, ignoring the pain caused by the 27 previous times when his body came into contact with the floor, and invited himself to taste delicious food or something. So, I have always regarded these two guys as competitors. Am I an idiot? He is indeed an idiot. Bang, he curled his lips in dissatisfaction. The silver-haired brother Fusion didn't say anything more. Instead, he chose to sit on the sofa. Since you are all begging like this, I will make an exception and stay. Oh, it's here. It's the silver-haired character's classic tsundere line. Eiji Shinzuma was so happy that he jumped up and down. He pulled Takahashi Makoto and said excitedly, "Phoenixon teacher, did you see it? Did you see it? This is the real version of tsundere." Yeah, I've seen it," the king of Black Flame. Compared to the excited new wife Eiji, Takahashi Makoto was much calmer. After holding his chin and thinking for a moment, he sighed in a tone full of regret. It's a pity that not only is the gender wrong, but most importantly, she's not a lowly type girl with twin tails. Tisk, that's such a pity. Hey. I'm talking about you. If you can survive the beating, the silver-haired guy who still has various pains in his back, the only thing he can do at this moment is probably to try the legendary I kill you with my eyes skilled, right? Although he did not cook food with soul-soothing properties, what is incredible is that after dinner, the hatred value of the silver-haired brother Fukuda dropped rapidly, although he did not fall into a captive with nothing to do, but compared to the previous one, I can't wait to see you in terms of the mood of killing Makoto Takahashi. At this moment, the attitude of the silver-haired boy Fukuda towards a certain middle-class cartoonist has changed from hatred to dissatisfaction. In addition to being able to sustain human life, it can also capture girls and gay friends. Food is indeed a great thing. The power of food. Looking at Eiji, the new wife, who was still immersed in the food, and Uncle Ding Ding, who was showing off various facial expressions because of the food. The silver-haired boy suddenly seemed to remember something, and his hands stopped involuntarily. He came down and murmured in a low voice, "It seems, it will be an interesting subject. A comic about food? Silver-haired brother Fukuda, you really have great ideas." Makoto Takahashi appeared behind the silver-haired brother Fukuda like a ghost. "Learn to cook with me." "Hey. I'm a cartoonist, I don't want to spend my time on cooking." He squinted at his new wife Eiji, and the silver-haired boy Fukuda decisively rejected Takahashi Makoto's proposal. "If you spend more energy on cooking, how can you catch up with monster-like existences like you?" "Huh? But a cartoonist who can't cook?" Makoto Takahashi gently tapped the shoulder of the silver-haired brother Fukuda and issued a devilish persuasion, "But he can't draw food comics that resonate with the soul. The weather is cold, so I'll update early, and all readers please keep warm. As for a certain cat that drinks more hot water, I won't talk about it, but you readers will understand." Laughs. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Male. Chapter 645. No. After dinner, the silver-haired young man Fukuda was not in a hurry to leave. Of course, he was not really going to learn cooking from a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, but was just very interested in the food comics that Makoto Takahashi mentioned casually. "As for the persuasion of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, you have a lot of ideas, so learn to cook with me." The silver-haired young man Fukuda of course chose to ignore it. Although Ding Ding Jisen and the others' performance was a bit exaggerated, but I have to say that the dinner just now was the most delicious meal I have ever eaten in my life. Although the silver-haired young man Fukuda has the attribute known as tsundere, he has not yet become a pure-blooded tsundere who says something but acts honestly, so he will naturally not be stingy about boasting about the dinner provided by a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, and the taste of the food, and the exaggerated expressions of Ding Ding Jisen and the others, suddenly gave me some bold ideas. "So, silver-haired young man Fukuda, are you going to create a comic about food?" Looking at the spirited silver-haired young man Fukuda, Takahashi Makoto pouted expressionlessly, "But according to the information I have, you don't even know the 20 ways to eat instant noodles. You have no cooking skills at all, but you have the courage to challenge a food-related comic. Did Miss Liang give you this courage to die?" "Huh? Ah Cheng, don't underestimate me." It is said that among the cartoonists, apart from Eiji Nizuma, the only one who can have the courage and not know the consequences of his life to confront a certain Chuyuni cartoonist is probably the silver-haired young man Fukuda. And who stipulates that cartoonists who create food comics must be able to cook food? That's true. Looking at the aggressive silver-haired young man Fukuda, Takahashi Makoto spread his hands helplessly. "But as I said before, if you don't even have basic cooking skills, are you sure that the food comics you draw can really resonate with readers?" "Huh? Resonance? What the hell is that?" The silver-haired young man Fukuda expressed his incomprehension of the question raised by Takahashi Makoto. "Huh? As long as the comics are interesting, it's fine, right?" Silver-haired young man Fukuda brother, the so-called comics, in addition to being interesting, also need to pay attention to the compatibility with the cartoonist. Seeing the silver-haired boy Fukuda listening attentively, a certain middle school cartoonist nodded with satisfaction, and continued with a pleasant smile, "Take food comics as an example. If the cartoonist himself only relies on his imagination and has no cooking skills to conceive some novel dishes, maybe at the beginning of the comic series, this novelty will indeed make the readers feel interesting, but as the series continues, when the readers lose the freshness, especially when they realize that the comics are not in line with reality, after seeing the gap in reality, the attitude towards food comics will take a sharp turn for the worse in an instant." In other words, if you create a comic about food, you can't just rely on imagination alone, but also combine it with reality. After a brief silence, the silver-haired boy Fukuda stared at Takahashi Makoto with a weird look. It does make some sense, but I say, Chang, are you sure you are not trying to induce me to learn cooking from you? Tisk. How can this be considered as inducement? The existence who can truly perform the master-level persuasion technique, but a certain one who has played the girl from innocent and kind to blackened collapse as a beast of survival behavior. Seemingly a little annoyed by the questioning of the silver-haired brother Fusion, Takahashi Chang curled his lips in dissatisfaction. I am just giving you some suggestions now, or showing you the core idea of food comics. Humph, Chang, are you so kind? The pain in the body of the silver-haired brother Fusion has not completely dissipated, and it is natural to have doubts due to resentment. After all, no matter how delicious the food of a certain middle school cartoonist is, it is just food after all, and it does not have the heaven-defying effect of senzu beans that completely restores injuries and physical strength. If this is true, then I am really grateful. When seeing others better than themselves, they always hold the banner of don't forget each other when you are rich and powerful and deliberately want to gain benefits, and when others are selflessly contributing, they suspect that others have bad intentions. Yes, humans are such inferior creatures. Of course, the silver-haired boy Fukuda is not such a person. The reason why he treats Takahashi Makoto in such an attitude is entirely because he was knocked down 27 times in a row before. After being knocked down 27 times in a row, he can still talk to the other party happily. It must not be a human, right? At least in terms of mental power, he is definitely close to a high school student who wants to become the god of the new world. Still can't understand? Tisk, sorry, it's my fault. I overestimated your level, silver-haired boy. Takahashi Makoto covered his forehead and shook his head, sighing in a helpless tone. I thought you, who could associate food comics with a dinner, had opened the door to the new world called Zone, but I didn't expect that you still maintained such a naive way of thinking. Alas, ordinary people are just ordinary people after all, and mediocre people are just mediocre after all. The kind of mortals counterattack and beat geniuses' bloody plots really only appear in comics and novels. Tisk, Chang, you bastard, the vein on his forehead jumped, and the silver-haired boy Fukuda subconsciously raised his fist. In the past, when facing his editor-in-chief Yujiro, this kind of threat was very effective. However, after noticing the pleasure and expectation of you want to be knocked down 27 times again in the eyes of a certain Chuyunibaku manga artist, the silver-haired young man Fukuda, who realized that he was no match for him, could only snort coldly, reluctantly put down his clenched fist, and very deliberately changed the subject. Then, according to what you said, Chen, if you have not practiced cooking, you can't create a food-themed comic. Indeed, although it was a bit regrettable that he was unable to complete the counter-killing behavior, Takahashi Chang still used a string of questions to answer the silver-haired young man Fukuda's questions. What seasonings should be used when cooking? How should the heat be used? What techniques should be used in cooking? If these common sense knowledge are not mastered, are you sure that what you created is a real food comic? This. The always strong silver-haired young man Fukuda, for the first time, understood what the so-called frustration was. So, silver-haired young man, do you understand? Looking at the silent silver-haired young man Fukuda, a certain Chuyunibaku manga artist felt very pleased. As a cartoonist, you don't look down on comics, but it is precisely because of this that you, who are bound by the identity of a cartoonist and confined to the world of comics, look down on the world of cooking. Should a certain cat change his mouse? I tried the sliding verification several times, and it took 10 minutes in the end. And it seems that the road to job transfer is far away. You should continue to do it and wait for the 2-month probation period for new employees to end before you talk about this. What the hell? It's okay to be treated as a spare tire in terms of feelings, but now he is even being treated as a spare tire in terms of work? Ah, what a misfortune. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 646. Silver-haired brother Fukuda wants to create a food comic. If at the beginning, this was just because he was inspired by the food of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, and such an idea came up in a flash, it would probably be just the so-called 3-minute heat, but after talking with Takahashi Makoto, perhaps he was interfered by the powerful brainwashing ability of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, or after realizing the difficulty of creating food comics, the silver-haired brother finally made up his mind. From the behavior of silver-haired brother Fukuda, who has always regarded Takahashi Makoto and Nazuma Eiji as competitors since his debut, despite repeated defeats, silver-haired brother Fukuda has never had the idea of giving up, and in the constant failures, he has learned from experience and worked hard to grow. Therefore, although silver-haired brother Fukuda is not as good as Nazuma Eiji and Takahashi Makoto now, and has even been gradually distanced by the good friends of Little Otter and Yachin Mu Menjai, this does not mean that silver-haired brother Fukuda is weak. On the contrary, silver-haired brother Fukuda is the real strong man. Because the so-called failure is a very difficult thing to accept, but turning that unwillingness into motivation is not something that everyone can do. Although you may not succeed in the future, the desire to work hard is not wrong. At least the weak in the mouth of humans do not have such awareness and will. Oh, so when cutting, the direction of the kitchen knife is this. The silver-haired brother Fusion, who was cutting vegetables, showed a look of surprise on his face. Before actual practice, I only drew it based on my imagination, and it turned out to be a big difference. Oh, it seems that it's not just helping, but also practicing to create food comics. You are working hard, silver-haired brother. Looking at the silver-haired brother Fusion wearing an apron, a middle school cartoonist standing next to him couldn't help but sighed. As expected, interest is the best teacher. Huh? Ah Cheng, what are you talking about? Upon hearing this, the silver-haired boy Fusion, who was practicing cutting vegetables, paused for a moment, then pouted his lips and said, "The reason why I help cut vegetables is to be able to eat delicious food earlier, not to practice cooking for the purpose of creating food comics." Tisk tisk tisk, silver-haired boy, you are arrogant again. Ignoring the silver-haired boy Fusion with a frown on his face, Takahashi Makoto pinched his chin and thought for a while. After a moment, he teased unscrupulously, "How about calling you Tsundere Silver from now on? By the way, don't waste your silver straight hair that even Jinsan would envy, so, tie it into a double ponytail." "Ah Cheng, I really am grateful for your kindness," he said words of thanks, but he was holding a kitchen knife in his hand, and with a face that exuded a strong black aura, the silver-haired boy gritted his teeth and said so, and launched a surprise attack without hesitation. "Oh, are you finally willing to fight me?" It seemed very casual, but Takahashi Makoto blocked the surprise attack with a wooden sword at some point. But this level, let's not talk about the forgiving uncle in the frenzy state. In terms of momentum and killing intent, the silver-haired boy, you are not even as good as a certain slime elite leader with sister control. Tisk, smacking his lips unhappily, the silver-haired boy Fukuda did not continue to attack, but turned around and continued to cut into strips. By the way, Tsundere Silver, aren't you going to continue trying? Seeing the actions of the silver-haired boy Fukuda, Takahashi Makoto waved the wooden sword in his hand helplessly, and muttered in a somewhat resentful tone, "Isn't it said that the silver-haired guys all have the blood of berserkers?" But now looking at the performance of the silver-haired boy, it seems that he is different from Bayasha, and the difference between the two dogs is obvious. "Hey, Cheng, the shredding is done, the rest is up to you." Just as Takahashi Makoto was muttering and complaining, the silver-haired boy Fukuda threw the kitchen knife aside heavily. "Hurry up and finish the cooking." "Leave it to me, Tsundere-jin." Watching the silver-haired boy Fukuda turning around and preparing to leave the kitchen, Takahashi Makoto said in a sincere tone, I won't let your sacrifice go to waste. Well, bet on the name of the crazy cooking demon Feng Guangai Yuan Kilma. The silver-haired boy paused, with his back to Takahashi Makoto, his mouth twitching constantly. Although he didn't know why a certain middle school cartoonist suddenly said such a weird thing, it was certain that Takahashi Makoto had definitely made up a lot of weird plots in his mind at this moment. Originally, the silver-haired young man Fukuda was planning to leave after eating delicious food, but he was stopped by Takahashi Makoto. No, it was not just the silver-haired young man Fukuda who was stopped, but also the newly married Eiji and the white girl who were going to complete the comic manuscript. Hey, Tsundere-jin, although a long time has passed. Takahashi Makoto suddenly asked a question similar to recalling the glorious past under the gaze of two cartoonists and a prospective cartoonist, but what I want to confirm now is, Tsundere-jin, has your favorite comic changed? The favorite comic. Hearing Takahashi Makoto's abrupt question, the silver-haired young man Fukuda was stunned, and then fell into a long period of contemplation, and the expression on his face began to change constantly. After a long time, he slowly said, "No. My favorite comic is still the same as before, it is still the comic called To Love. It's still the same, yeah, Tsundere-jin, you are really a person of temperament." Ignoring the confused look on the face of the girl Mashiro, Takahashi Makoto clapped and screamed. When the silver-haired boy Fukuda was so angry that he was about to go berserk, he restrained his smile and said slowly, "Then Tsundere-jin, since you like it, why don't you draw a similar comic? I remember you seemed to have said before that because of the blessing of the identity of a cartoonist, when there are some times when there are some undescribable needs, you will draw some books yourself." "Shut up, bastard," the silver-haired boy Fukuda, whose dark history was suddenly exposed, roared with shame and anger, interrupting the words of a certain middle school cartoonist. His eyes flashing with murderous intent, he stared at Makoto Takahashi, who was smiling happy in front of him, panting and muttering resentfully, "If I can beat him, if I can beat him." "Teacher Feng Guangai Yuan, are you asking Teacher Fukuda to combine food comics with the comics you are interested in?" Nizuma Eiji immediately noticed Makoto Takahashi's intention, frowned and thought for a moment, then shook his head silently, and said with a rather regretful tone, "What a pity. I like and am good at fighting comics, but unfortunately they are not compatible with food comics." "Huh? King of Black Flame, you underestimate the tolerance of comics, right? Food comics also have fighting ones." Seeing the regretful Eiji Nizuma, Makoto Takahashi's eyes flashed with a strangeness. "Hey, King of Black Flame, you are not restricted by the subject matter of food comics, are you?" "Restricted?" Eiji Nizuma's expression immediately became extremely serious, staring at Makoto Takahashi. "Food comics, on the surface, seem to be incompatible with battle comics, but who stipulates that chefs can't fight?" Looking at Eiji Nizuma's expectant look, Makoto Takahashi can be sure that this genius cartoonist was definitely misled by what he just reminded the silver-haired brother Fukuda: the battle between chefs, the competition of cooking skills, the duel of dishes, this is usually the main line of food comics, but who stipulated that chefs can only fight with other chefs? "Oh, Mr. Feng Guangai Yuan, could it be that?" Nizuma Eiji immediately showed a look of realization on his face. Humans hunt different creatures to obtain food. For modern people, this is a matter of course, but in the distant past, humans challenged creatures in nature in order to survive. Seeing Nizuma Eiji's somewhat enlightened look, Takahashi Makoto nodded and said, "That's right, it's the same as what you think, King of Black Flame. For example, the process of obtaining ingredients is a battle, a cruel war between humans as chefs and creatures living in nature called life and death." A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 647. When the comic To Love is mentioned, what will come to mind first for readers who regard it as their favorite comic? Regardless of the plot or the characters, I believe that readers have their own preferences, as well as some supporting reasons that do not need to be elaborated, but after the original author was attacked by forgiveness, I believe that when this comic is mentioned, the first thing that readers think of is the increasingly unscrupulous painting style of selling and profiting, meat, right? Nowadays, under the guidance of a certain middle school cartoonist, he connects food comics with various welfare, selling, and profit, meat, painting styles. Of course, the first comics that come to mind are the comics that frequently appear in various explosive dishes. The Spirit of the Shogun is the food comic that tells the story of the King of Medicine's legendary journey to build the Crystal Palace using gourmet cuisine. Although Takahashi Makoto was just a guide and did not tell the silver-haired brother Fukuda about the content of Shogunary Soul in detail, the silver-haired brother Fukuda likes the comic to love and has now begun to focus on Uncle Tintin. Ask around and find out how you feel after eating the food. The next food manga by the silver-haired boy Fukuda is very likely to be the famous Spirit of the Shokuji. As for Eiji Niizuma, after a certain Chennai manga artist briefly mentioned some ideas, Eiji Niizuma, who had accidentally fallen into a blind spot in his thinking, found a new path. With his own fighting style, he combines and integrates various kinds of food, so that the content of the comic, which was originally just about the competition of chefs' cooking skills, has been expanded to the battle between chefs and ingredients. It has been limited to the battle between chefs and chefs. The cooking showdown turns into a battle between chefs and everything related to cooking. If nothing else, Eiji Niizuma uses his own fighting style and a comic about gourmet cooking. It is very likely that the gourmet comic The Prisoner of Gourmet tells the story of the gourmet hunter Aru. That's it for today. Looking at the thoughtful new wife Eiji and the silver-haired brother Fukuda in front of him, Takahashi Makoto did not continue to talk about food manga-related topics to the two, but instead showed an expectant look. He mocked the two cartoonists, and whether it's the King of Black Flame or Tsundere Silver, if you want to draw food comics, please start learning cooking skills seriously first. Understood? In order to draw different types of comics, I will definitely work very hard. Niizuma Eiji jumped up from the sofa and saluted Takahashi Makoto with a serious face. I leave the cooking training to you, master. Hey. Even if I learn cooking skills from Chen, I just want to improve the food. I'm not practicing to complete food comics. After the silver-haired brother Fukuda finished speaking, he saw Takahashi Makoto and Shinzuma Eiji staring at himself with strange eyes. He reacted instantly and roared angrily with black lines on his face, "Don't call me arrogant. I'm not arrogant." White coat. The Mashiro girl, who had been silent all this time and looked completely like a passerby, tugged on the sleeves of her white coat and stared at Makoto Takahashi with the cat's expectant eyes exclusive to pet girls. My manga. Girl, do you also want to learn cooking from me? Makoto Takahashi turned around and stared at Mashiro girl. After asking in a low voice, he held his chin and complained to himself, it's a pity that Mashiro girl, your talent is not that good. All the focus is on painting, and even if you spend a lot of energy and time improving your cooking skills, I always feel that it will make the working boy very happy, so happy that you can't help but want to bully him. But the setting of a person with low ability to live independently but incredible cooking skills seems quite interesting. White coat. Seeing that a certain middle-level cartoonist was completely immersed in the world of her imagination, the real white girl frowned slightly, and once again reached out to pull the sleeve of the other person's white coat. After successfully diverting Takahashi Makoto's attention, the Mashiro girl put on a serious look and reiterated in a calm tone, my comics. Ahem, girl, you want to sign a contract with me and change your job to become a magical girl? No, do you want to transfer to a cute cook? Makoto Takahashi coughed lightly and said he asked the Mashiro girl in a serious tone, as for the price, I just need you to agree to help me complete the comic Fate and its related series that I am currently serializing. The Mashiro girl didn't speak this time. Instead, she stared at Makoto Takahashi seriously. maybe she didn't understand why a middle-class cartoonist could change the topic so efficiently. Don't agree? Hey, girl, you must know that the rules of equivalent exchange are not limited to the comic style. Makoto Takahashi shook his head helplessly. I want to whatever you get, you must give something. Girl, since you want to use comics to change human thoughts and become a god in the new world like us, you will naturally have to pay. How do I draw my manga? The Mashiro girl didn't have the patience to listen to a certain middle-level cartoonist's second-level philosophy. She interrupted Takahashi Makoto's chatter without politeness and asked straight to the point, or rather, he was pleading, Whitecoat, teach me. Didn't you hear everything just now? If you want to create food comics, you first need to master a certain level of cooking skills. Gourmet comics, I don't like them. Mashiro glanced at the bankachan on the table. Perhaps for Mashiro, the so-called gourmet food is probably sweets such as bankachan. After swallowing gently, Mashiro focused her eyes on Takahashi Makoto again. Love comics, teach me. Love comics? Tisk, this is not my area of expertise. Takahashi Makoto gently rubbed his head, and said with a helpless tone, if it is a comic about the whole process of a girl's blackening, or even a comic about the collapse to the point of chopping up the male protagonist and feeding him to the dog, I might be able to give you a lot of hints, but pure-blooded love comics, are there really such illusory and beautiful things in this world? Ayano said that as long as you draw the kind of plot that makes people's heart beat. Seeing Takahashi Makoto's confused face, Mashiro hesitated for a moment, and added in a calm tone, but the plot that makes your heart beat, I can't draw it? A plot that makes people's heart beat? Although it is recommended, that's right, but the idea of that new editor is really simple enough. Takahashi Makoto recalled the editor-in-chief who followed Yoshida before, and showed a disdainful smile on his face. I can guarantee that many readers will also have their heartbeats accelerated after reading the plot of Ali Has a Good Father. What is that? Seeing Takahashi Makoto's unusually weird smile, Mashiro girl asked in confusion, is it a love comic? No, that plot is too early for you, Mashiro girl. If it was Uncle Ding Ding, he would definitely complain sharply, but at this moment, Takahashi Makoto was talking to Mashiro girl. Imagine the embarrassment of sharing a joke with others, but being asked a serious question by the other party. Maybe you can understand why Takahashi Makoto suddenly changed the subject at this moment. Girl, how about we do a test now? Test? Mashiro tilted her head and thought for a moment, then asked Takahashi Makoto persistently again, is it related to love comics? Well, not only that, but more importantly, forget it, you don't need to know the rest. Takahashi Makoto seemed to have thought of something, his face became a little strange, then he took a deep breath and asked Mashiro, who was full of expectations, suppose Mashiro, you are a cartoonist serialized in a monthly magazine. Then one day after school, Sara confessed to you in an empty classroom, but because he was too nervous, Sara excitedly slipped the words please date me that would determine the winner when confessing as please sign for me. What would you do in such a scenario? Give the autographed version to Kota. After thinking for a moment, Mashiro covered her chest with one hand and waved her fist with the other hand, saying seriously, Whitecoat, this is very interesting, I want to draw this. Is that the answer? Takahashi Makoto looked at the familiar ceiling of his home, a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes, and he muttered in a low voice, maybe, this is the choice of Steins Gate. The remaining work has not been completed, and the new work is a lot of leaders who say that you can leave after completing the work. A certain cat laughed, the work of the Lifetime series of his meow, are you sure you want a certain cat to leave instead of working to death? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 648. The Choice of Steins Gate. This is the catchphrase of the male protagonist in Steins Gate. It is also the saying used by Makoto Takahashi to analyze all reasonable and unreasonable phenomena in the world after he put on a white coat and changed his job to become a crazy cartoonist. But today, after communicating with two cartoonists, Eiji Nazuma and the silver-haired boy Fukuda, as well as the prospective cartoonist Mashiro, when Makoto Takahashi expressed this emotion again, he was no longer as relaxed as before. Instead, he seemed to have noticed some serious problem and fell into deep thought. White coat, white coat. Looking at a middle school cartoonist who was thinking hard, Mashiro called out several times in a row without success, and decisively shifted her attention from the new comic to the annual cake. The new comic is a very important thing, but for Mashiro, eating the annual cake is also a life event of the same importance. Hey, Aiken, I'm a little, the silver-haired young man Fusion, who had just finished discussing feelings after eating drugged food with Uncle Ding Ding, was only halfway through his words when he saw a certain middle school cartoonist looking absent-minded. He couldn't help but curl his lips and complain to Uncle Ding Ding in a low voice. Just now he was talking about all kinds of food cartoons with great enthusiasm, but now he is playing deep thoughts alone without saying a word. Tisk, Ding Ding Ji-san, being an assistant to a guy like Aiken, in various senses, you are really hard. Ahaha, indeed. There was no scene of shaking hands with tears in his eyes and shouting that someone finally understands me. After all, Uncle Ding Ding has long passed that age, so the only thing he can do at this moment for the complaints of the silver-haired young man Fusion is to shrug helplessly and make a speech of agreement with a wry smile. Hey, Mr. Howin, are you thinking about any difficult problems? Nazuma Eiji also noticed Takahashi Makoto's strangeness, but compared to the Mashiro girl who stole the Bonkachan and the silver-haired boy Fukuda who complained about everything, the king of Black Flame, as the designated ally of a certain Chuyunibu manga artist, was much more decisive and asked directly, is it something related to the manga? It is indeed something related to the manga, right? You can answer yes or no. In response to Nazuma Eiji's question, Takahashi Makoto, who came to his senses, answered and suddenly began to drive away the people present. In view of the recent appearance of murder ghosts at night, considering everyone's personal safety, let's stop today's discussion. By the way, Chang, I just had dinner, so it's too early to go home now. Is it a little bit? The silver-haired young man Fukuda, who had already had a rough idea of the food comic, originally wanted to continue discussing with a certain middle school cartoonist, so he was quite puzzled by the sudden expulsion of a certain middle school cartoonist, and let's not talk about the species you imagined, such as the killer. Oh? You dare to question my order? Takahashi Makoto narrowed his eyes and stared at the silver-haired young man Fukuda. So the arrogant silver you want to die directly in my hands, instead of being cut into 17 pieces by the killer, can I understand it this way? Tisk, after watching Takahashi Makoto put on a posture of drawing a sword and chopping people at the slightest disagreement, out of the instinct of biological fear of death, the silver-haired young man wisely chose to get up and leave. I will visit again tomorrow, Aiken. With the silver-haired young man Fukuda taking the lead, whether it is Nazuma Eiji or Shin, the white girl naturally didn't say anything more and left one after another. By the way, although Makoto Takahashi suddenly started to drive everyone away, he still sent everyone to the door as the host, and even summoned the exclusive guard Captain Sarada boy for Makoto Mashiro. Ah Chang, you today. After everyone left, Uncle Ding Ding hesitated again and again, and still asked, why did you suddenly, hey, I know. I'm leaving now. Immediately. Right now. Under the murderous gaze of a certain Chuyunibaku manga artist, Uncle Ding Ding didn't think that he could resolve Makoto Takahashi's murderous intent with the professionalism of the assistant side. So, it can only be said that a certain Chuyunibaku manga artist is too terrifying, and Uncle Ding Ding can't be blamed for being too coward. All of this is the choice of Steins Gate. Uncle Ding Ding heard Takahashi Makoto sighing in a low voice the moment the door was closed. It seems that after talking with Mashiro-chan, that guy Makoto became strange, right, looking at the closed door, recalling Takahashi Makoto's various abnormal behaviors before, Uncle Ding Ding, who was expelled by a certain Chuyunibu cartoonist and embarked on the road home, couldn't help but mutter in a low voice, and what the hell is the choice of Steins, gate that Makoto always talks about? Food Wars, Shokuji no Soma. The Captive of Food. Monthly Girls. Ignoring the people who were inexplicably driven away, after Uncle Ding Ding left, Makoto Takahashi came to the desk, picked up a pen and wrote down the names of 3 comics, then stared at the words on the table and fell into deep thought again. Thinking, this seemingly unimportant but very important behavior, not only promotes the continuous evolution and development of human beings, but also brings endless fear and disasters to human beings. If humans stop thinking, then even if they are alive, they are just like a bunch of mindless walking corpses, but if humans indulge in thinking, then because of excessive curiosity and exploration, they will fall into endless fear and extend endless disasters. Unlike other cartoonists, Takahashi Makoto, as a time traveler, does not need to spend time and energy to conceive comics when creating comics. He only needs to copy the existing comics according to his memory, but it is precisely because of this that Takahashi Makoto, who does not spend too much energy and time on creating comics, will subconsciously go to some seemingly important but meaningless questions. For example, now, although he calls himself Mad Demon Fengguangai Yuan Kuma, although his current identity is a popular cartoonist, but in terms of curiosity and exploration of unknown things, Takahashi Makoto still cannot give up this instinct from human beings. If the idea of using the topic of food and comics to guide the silver-haired brother Fukuda and Nazuma Eiji to create food comics was just an accidental idea by Makoto Takahashi, then the behavior of deliberately mentioning some of the comic plots and letting the girl Mashiro say some of the subsequent content was a blatant test. That's right, it was a test. Every move of the time traveler may change the world. No, to be precise, when a world welcomes a visitor from another world, the world line that the world originally belonged to has changed. The most obvious and typical example is the 3 comics written by Makoto Takahashi just now. I just gave a little guidance. Recalling the conversation with his former wife Eiji, the silver-haired boy Fukuda, and the white girl, Takahashi Makoto sat back in his chair and muttered to himself, there are no too many hints, nor too many hints, but those comics were not originally created by their original authors, but they were created by them with my guidance. But so is this a coincidence, or an accident? Self-consolation or? No, there is no coincidence, nor does there exist an accident, there is, just inevitability. Self-denial or? The existence that is destined to appear, and the planned world line. Human beings, for the fear of the unknown, as long as there is a reason that can convince themselves. This is the choice of Steins gate. You can accept all reasonable and unreasonable existence. 2 months of work was compressed into 5 days to complete. A certain cat is still alive and can be updated now. In a sense, it is really fortunate. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 649. Chapter 649. Fukuda said depressedly, everything in the comics is a lie. That guy Aiken, I wonder if he has returned to normal. Fukuda, the silver-haired brother who was walking on the road carrying the ingredients, muttered with doubts and worries, I don't know what Shinzuma-kun and the others think, but Aiken yesterday that guy's state is definitely different from when Chuyunibu breaks out. Tisk, it's not that I'm worried about something unexpected happening to Aiken, it's just that if the cooking training is delayed and the creation of the food comic is delayed, it will be a fight. But I have to give that guy a good scolding. Oh, it seems that Mr. Fukuda is the same as me, very worried about what Mr. Phoenix Academy said, suddenly a big, ahem, it should be a new wife AG who suddenly jumped out from the crowd, with I have seen through it with your arrogant nature, you greet the silver-haired brother Fukuda with a smile. The forward movement stopped, and the silver-haired boy Fusion's face instantly became a little stiff, and the atmosphere became a little awkward. Actually, I also think that Mr. Phoenix Academy's behavior yesterday was a bit abnormal, so I said very worriedly, Ag Nyizuma made a pair of telescopes with his hands and jumped up and down around the silver-haired brother Fukuda, but Mr. Fukuda, a real man. Teacher from Phoenix Academy, no, it should be said that the fierce master of the Phoenix Academy will not stop moving forward because of a trivial matter. In other words, everything I just said. Facing the high-spirited Nyizuma Ag, the face of the silver-haired brother Fukuda was as ugly as ever at this moment. Nyizuma-kun, you heard it all. Yeah, everyone has heard it. Ag Nyizuma stopped all kinds of weird behaviors, gently patted the shoulder of the silver-haired brother Fukuda, and said in a joking tone, as expected, I told Master Jujhen of the Phoenix Academy same, Mr. Fusion, you are a complete arrogant person. I'm not arrogant, Hundan. Hey, let's go now, as if he didn't notice the mood of the silver-haired brother Fukuda who was about to go berserk. Ag, the new wife, skipped away happily. Hey. Whether it's Cheng or Ag, the new wife, they are all guys who can't communicate with common sense. Tisk, it's really irritating. Debating with Ag Shinzuma about I am not a tsundere will only lead to disregard, but debating with a certain middle-class manga artist on the same topic feels like asking for death, so, calm down, silver-haired brother Fukuda-kun. And speaking of the silver-haired boy Fukuda, don't you think it's too late to complain now? That tone you use when you're alone and grumbling. Do you dare to say that you are not tsundere? Too slow. Regarding the newly arrived new wife Ag and the silver-haired brother Fukuda, Takahashi Makoto decisively turned on the crazy Chuyuni mode and used complaints to complain, do you know? It's just because you guys arrived late, so it's delaying my time to recreate the world line, don't act like you don't care at all, Hundan. You must know that in the current world line, human beings will usher in destruction. The two destroyers of race have always declared that they want to turn humans into domestic animals, but this Demon King only implements the spiritual erosion strategy through comics. I feel like it is so weak. I always feel that if I say something at this time, then the level of improvement in my cooking skills in the next period of time will definitely not be as fast as the rapid improvement of my complaining skills, so, facing a certain second-level cartoonist the exclusive Chinese 2-style mocking complaint, the silver-haired boy Fukuda wisely chose to ignore it completely. Master, I'm sorry we're late, compared to the silent silver-haired brother Fukuda, Ag, the new wife, decisively chose to act cute. Seeing Ag Nyizuma's lack of moral integrity, even though they were the same person, the silver-haired brother Fukuda found it difficult to distinguish the talented cartoonist in front of him from the one whom readers regarded as new wife in the comic Dream Eater Little Angel. That character is connected together. Weird things are just weird things after all, and it is impossible to change jobs and become an angel-like existence. Sure enough, everything in the comics is a lie. If it weren't for the purpose of improving his cooking skills so that he could better complete food comics, the silver-haired brother Fukuda swore that he would never stay at Makoto Takahashi's house for even 1 second longer, at least at the beginning. The silver-haired brother Fukuda brother Fusion thinks so. But during the break in culinary training, after Eiji Arizuma and Makoto Takahashi finished a chapter of the comic Fate, the silver-haired guy's mind changed. No, it should be said that the original worldview has been destroyed and reshaped. Momentum. This word appears frequently in hot-blooded comics but is rarely described directly. The silver-haired boy Fukuda has always believed that it is just a fictional fantasy in comics or novels. However, after seeing Eiji Nyiizuma and Makoto Takahashi complete the story, when drafting the comic, the silver-haired boy Fukuda really felt that this was only a fantasy that existed in fiction. Pick up the brush, take a deep breath, and then put pen to paper. Whether it's Eiji Niizuma or Makoto Takahashi, this series of coherent actions is just completing the manga draft. But in the eyes of the onlooker, the silver-haired young man Fukuda, the two cartoonists raised their pens like spears and pierced them like swords, and their pen strokes were like swords flashing with cold light. In other words, it didn't feel like they were completing a cartoon draft at all, but more like you and I going back and forth to create a famous cartoon. Fight fiercely for true sword victory. Hey, are you kidding me? He rubbed his eyes vigorously and shook his head. The silver-haired boy Fukuda had a look of disbelief on his face. I'm just drawing a manga, why would I? Are you having strange fantasies? It's because you didn't sleep well yesterday because you were working on the manuscript. Oh, it's done. Just when the silver-haired brother Fukuda was making excuses to avoid doubting his life, Eiji Niizuma suddenly put down his painting brush and fell into a sluggish state. After a moment, Eiji Niizuma seemed to feeling something. He turned to stare at Makoto Takahashi, who also put down his brush next to him, with a happy look on his face. It seems that the person who wins this time is still me, teacher from the Phoenix Academy. Huh? King of Black Flame, don't you think you're too happy now? Makoto Takahashi said expressionlessly while sorting out the manga manuscript. Although in terms of completion speed, this time you did beat me, but don't forget, you are not the one who really makes the judgment of victory or defeat. Ahaha, the teacher from the Phoenix Institute said the same thing last time. Eiji Shinzuma spread his hands indifferently, picked up the arranged manga manuscript, and walked towards the Mashiro girl, who was very obediently drawing the manga manuscript at the side, while not forgetting to ridicule him. A middle-grade cartoonist who just laughed at himself, but the final winner is the one who finished the cartoon manuscript first. Hey, after spitting in displeasure, Takahashi Makoto also walked towards the Mashiro girl. King of Black Flame, let's duel again. Oh. It's just what I want. Eiji Niizuma put the manga manuscript on the table, turned to Takahashi Makoto and asked, are the rules still the same as last time, Mr. Phoenix Academy? Of course, Takahashi Makoto, like Eiji Niizuma, put the manga manuscript on the table. The blood and determination are integrated into the manga manuscript, and the pride and strength of the warrior are engraved. Feel it carefully, that comes from the soul. Resonate, Lord of Black Flame. I see, are we comparing each other? Watching Eiji Shinzuma and Makoto Takahashi exchange manga manuscript observations, Fukuda, the silver-haired boy on the side, had a surprised expression on his face, but this expression only lasted for a second. The silver-haired boy Fukuda immediately switched to the expression of care for the mentally retarded. Since it is a manga manuscript of the same episode, is it necessary to draw it twice just to compete? Those two guys are really too busy. Ah. Well, there are no marks or special marks. Eiji Niizuma was looking through the manga manuscript, but he did not observe the manga manuscript as a cartoonist as the silver-haired brother Fukuda predicted, but actually read it. Well, there are no hidden warlocks that affect judgment, and there are no seals implanted to confuse people's hearts. Coincidentally, Takahashi Makoto also did the same behavior as his new wife Eiji. Ah, what I didn't understand was not just the explanation of Makoto Takahashi's 20-legged success, but the behavior of the two of them reading the manga. The silver-haired brother Fukuda noticed that the two of them were not reading. The comic manuscript is more like checking every page of the comic manuscript. Which manga manuscript makes your soul tremble, then who will win? After confirming that there is no abnormality in the manga manuscript, Niizuma Eiji and Takahashi Makoto immediately turned their backs to the Mashiro girl, like shuffling cards. They exchanged manga manuscripts several times, and then each held a manga manuscript. At the same time, they turned to face Mashiro girl and said in unison, the judgment of victory or defeat is left to you, Mashiro-chan/Mashiro girl. At this time, I should complain about how geniuses like you really know how to play? Haha, The silver-haired brother Fukuda covered his forehead and said in a helpless tone, "By the way, I have always regarded these two guys as competitors. I am indeed an idiot. The handover of work has finally begun. Ha 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 ha. The day of liberation is not far away. Well, not far away, a certain cat can finally do it. Ahem, please readers, please ignore the above words. I always feel that a certain cat is excited and has set a very serious flag. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 650. Chapter 650, The Reason Why Comic Drafts Related to Battle Scenes Always Fail to Win. Regarding the decisive battle between Eiji Arizuma and Makoto Takahashi, the silver-haired brother Fukuda regretfully did not observe the end. Because when a middle-level cartoonist held a weapon, showed a full of menacing smile, and made a request to leave, the silver-haired brother Fukuda, who had a biological instinct to avoid danger, decisively chose to leave. By the way, when the silver-haired boy Fukuda left, he had a very peaceful smile. Well, no, it should be like a funny villain. Before leaving, he didn't forget to leave words like "I will come again tomorrow." Such a classic way to retreat and leave. As for the exchange of victory and defeat between Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Shinzuma. Whispering sound. Uncle Tintin, who was concentrating on completing the comic manuscript, was startled by the sudden sound. Out of a subconscious reaction, his hand holding the brush shook, and then a page of the comic manuscript that was about to be completed, because of this hand shaking for the second time, and was hit hard again. Well, the point is, again. I mean Chang. After staring at the comic manuscript for a long time, Uncle Tintin found that he could still make repairs. After heaving a sigh of relief, he immediately used a tone full of resentment to say something to the person who had just made a sound. The second cartoonist complained, "Although I can understand your reluctance after losing to Mr. Eiji Niizuma, and I also know that you are very depressed about it, but you always make sudden noises at work, which really delays your work. Talk about progress." Huh? Tintin-ji-san, don't you think your statement is very problematic? In response to Uncle Tintin's resentful complaints, Takahashi Makoto replied angrily while drawing the manga manuscript, "It's so easy to be surrounded by people. Infected by things. Ding-ding-ji-san, are you sure you have really turned on the mirror Shisui's heart mode and work seriously in a focused state? I've never learned that weird skill." In response to Makoto Takahashi's reply, perhaps because he was stimulated by the setting the same thing has happened 3 times, Uncle Tintin suddenly said angrily and excitedly, "Could it be that I was interrupted at work because I wasn't focused enough? The culprit is Chang, okay. Tisk, I couldn't master the special skills because Jisang didn't love comics deeply enough." Makoto Takahashi stopped painting for the first time and pointed at the Mashiro girl who was painting quietly beside him, and the girl who was wearing headphones and shaking. The new wife Eiji, who was drawing while leaning on his body, said in a mocking tone that despised plug-ins, "Ding-ding-ji-san, you should have seen it too. It is also the work of assisting in completing the manga manuscript. Even if we have been talking for such a long time, then the 2 people next to me have not been disturbed at all, so, now that you have been reduced to the 3rd, don't ask too much. Tisk, I can't compare to you non-human beings." Although he burst out with such powerful complaints, Uncle Tintin still picked up the brush again, while revising the comic manuscript that had problems due to the interference of a middle-class cartoonist. He sighed helplessly, "Really, I suddenly felt that a mediocre mortal assistant like me should not be mixed among a group of monsters and non-human beings." On this day, Uncle Tintin finally had an explosive understanding of the principle of no comparison, no harm. Eiji Niizuma, who was drawing a manga manuscript, suddenly stopped moving and began to make a sultry voice. After successfully attracting everyone's attention, he took off his earphones and spoke to Takahashi. Makoto asked, "Hey, Teacher Phoenix Academy, I suddenly discovered a very strange thing. Humph. King of Black Flame, I don't want to talk to you right now. As for the reason, hearing the voice of Eiji Niizuma, a certain middle-class cartoonist subconsciously thought of the situation that Mashiro girl had previously left to judge the winner. After the duel, he immediately snorted angrily, if it's something that has nothing to do with comics, then let's not talk about it. After all, apart from comics, as mere humans, what qualifications do you have to communicate with the mad god of madness? Don't be surprised by the attitude of a middle-class cartoonist. After all, even if there is a reader opponent and a writing partner, even if you are an ally who completes the comic manuscript together, as long as there is a situation called win or lose after a contest, the loser will always be inexplicably hostile to the winner. Although after becoming a social person, this childish behavior pattern, which is almost like that of primary school students, has been hidden, but in fact, it is just hidden, and it does not mean that it disappears. What's more important is that the love and hatred between primary school students is far less than a piece of candy and a piece of chocolate. Simply put, it comes and goes quickly, but for society and adults, it is hidden behind the hostility in the heart will not disappear with the passage of time, but will gradually ferment and ferment. Later, driven by interests, it will become a sharp blade and fangs, harming others and ourselves, and it will be so cruel that it is hopeless. After all, the complexity of human nature is directly proportional to the growth of age. As expected, you are still holding grudges about the previous victory and defeat. Eiji Niizuma pouted dissatisfiedly, hugged his curled-up feet with both hands, and began to rock the chair rhythmically, but in the battle between victory and defeat in the serialized comic, go on, I have lost to the Phoenix Academy teacher many times. Tisk. When I mention this, I get even angrier. Takahashi Makoto put down, no, he should have thrown his paintbrush aside, and leaned back on the chair with his hands around his head. I have always been firmly in the lead in the previous wins and losses, but why did I suffer a series of failures after I started drawing comics related to battle scenes? Comic duels are not tennis duels. You can turn on the martial arts state to complete the rhythm of defeating the strong, so to be honest, Takahashi Makoto has always been brooding over failures. Of course it's because Mr. Howin's comics are too realistic, as if sensing Takahashi Makoto's doubts, Nizuma Eiji, as the best ally of the year, naturally would not be like a certain middle school cartoonist, with his mind full of bad intentions and a soul completely made up of black belly. Instead, he gave a concise hint, it is precisely because the plot is too realistic that the battle scenes lack imagination. After hearing Nizuma Eiji's hint, Takahashi Makoto fell into silence for the first time. When Mr. Howin finished the comics, he must have thought of bringing himself into it. Nizuma Eiji used the brush in his hand as a weapon, while gesturing Ming continued to explain, and it is precisely because of this idea that when constructing the battle scene, Mr. Howin considered more about what humans can do in reality rather than how gorgeous it is beyond human limits. In short, Mr. Howin is completely bound by your own super strong fighting power in reality. As expected, it is not unfair to lose at all. A real man. After understanding your own shortcomings, work hard to overcome them. That unwillingness is the best motivation. As for why Niizuma Eiji would say such a chicken soup-like words. Of course, it's because Niizuma Eiji himself does this. Hey, King of Black Flame, according to the principle of equivalent exchange. After understanding the reason for his failure, Takahashi Makoto lowered his head and thought for a moment, and suddenly asked, since you have answered my doubts, then, what is the strange thing you mentioned before? Rather than saying it's strange, it's just pure curiosity. Nizuma Eiji picked up a few pages of comics from the table, shaking them while asking his own questions. Why are there as many as 3 king-level heroic spirits in the Holy Grail War? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Mao. Chapter 651. Early in the previous duel with Makoto Takahashi, Eiji Nizuma already knew the identities of all the heroic spirits. For the readers who are still waiting, this may be something to be envied, right? But don't forget that many battle scenes in the manga Fate will be completed by Eiji Nizuma as the main character and Makoto Takahashi as the auxiliary, so don't be surprised why Eiji Nizuma knew the identities of the heroic spirits in the manga in advance. This is also natural. If you are not even familiar with the attributes of the combat characters, how can you draw a soul-shaking draft? 3 kings, are they too many? Makoto Takahashi hesitated for a moment and asked Nizuma Eiji's question. There are 7 heroic spirits around the Holy Grail War, and 3 of them were kings of countries in the past, nearly half of the lineup. Nizuma Eiji bit his brush and shook it up and down, as if he would not continue to draw unless a certain Chuyunibu cartoonist gave a reasonable explanation. Why did Mr. Howin set it up like this? Because it's very interesting. Makoto Takahashi was not perfunctory. After all, he was different from a certain plug-in cartoonist, a real genius cartoonist in the true sense. Perhaps other mortals haven't thought of it, but if it's you, the King of Black Flame, you should have understood the meaning of my setting, right? 3 kings, 3 kings. After repeating the setting in the comics, Nizuma Eiji pondered for a moment, a gleam of light flashed in his eyes, and his face showed an expectant look. Oh! The collision of wills and the contest of consciousness and consciousness, is it only a banquet between kings? Tisk, sometimes I really think that the King of Black Flame, you will definitely die young. Takahashi Makoto frowned and sighed in a helpless tone. Haven't you heard of the famous phrase called "you know too much to kill people"? Even if I will really be killed in the future, I will let my soul full of obsession hold on until the day when the comic Fate is finished before it dissipates. This kind of statement, full of the atmosphere of middle school, Nizuma Eiji must have been led astray by a certain middle school cartoonist. But, since Mr. Feng Guangyuan will arrange a banquet for the kings in the later plot, why not set all 7 heroic spirits as historical kings when setting up the heroic spirits at the beginning, instead of just selecting 3? Hey, King of Black Flame, I remember I have already said this before. Under the persistent questioning of Eiji Nizuma, Makoto Takahashi realized that if he could not answer all of Eiji Nizuma's questions at once, it would definitely greatly delay the completion of the comic manuscript. So a certain Chuyunibu cartoonist decisively chose to put down his brush, sit in front of Eiji Nizuma, and began to seriously answer his questions. The so-called heroic spirits, in simple terms, are the souls of past heroes. However, there are countless heroes in history and human legends, and some of them are kings and overlords who can leave their names in legends and history with their legendary experiences or great achievements, but more are those who have done things that humans can hardly do. If the scope of the selection of heroic spirits is limited to the king group, then how can such a magnanimity be worthy of this masterpiece? Oh, so there is the Knight Lancelot and King Arthur. Makoto Takahashi only gave a little hint, and Eiji Nizuma basically guessed several main lines of the later comics. It must be said that the imagination of this genius cartoonist is really too strong. The knight who was once under his command is now hostile to him in this Holy Grail War. Ah, the setting of Holy Grail War is really interesting. Yeah, that's right. This is the most interesting part of Holy Grail War. Takahashi Makoto is not just agreeing with Nizuma Eiji's statement, but he sincerely believes so. Can I interrupt you for a moment, Uncle Tintin, who was quietly finishing his comics on the side, but had actually been eavesdropping on the conversation between Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Nizuma, picked up the comic he was drawing and complained to Makoto Takahashi in a depressed tone. Speaking of this guy who killed children together with the sadistic Rain Ryunashuk, I remember you said his real name is Gilles de Rice, right? A guy like that, can he be considered a hero? It seems quite wrong for such a heroic spirit to appear in the Holy Grail War. Tisk, Tintin-san, it seems that your definition of a hero is still as superficial as ever. Makoto Takahashi's attitude towards Uncle Tintin is completely different from his attitude towards Eiji Nazuma. Surely it is because Uncle Tintin can provide a lot of pleasure, right? In your eyes, saving the country or saving the existence of mankind is what makes a hero. Tisk, should this idea be called childish or narrow-minded? Isn't a hero just like that? Uncle Tintin, who was criticized by a certain Chuyonabaka cartoonist for being superficial, childish, and narrow-minded, seemed to have forgotten the fear of being brainwashed by a certain Chuyonabaka cartoonist, and decisively retorted, but the character Jill DeRice you set in the comics has nothing to do with a hero. No, it's better to say that compared to a real hero, this guy should be a character in the demon villain camp. Oh my, according to what you said, Tintin-ji-san, since he is a hero, he should be a partner of justice, right? Takahashi Makoto, who summarized Uncle Tintin's speech, saw the other party nod, and immediately showed a joyful smile on his face that made Uncle Tintin afraid, and refuted, but it's not right. Justice or evil, they are just existences that are arbitrarily determined and divided by humans. Perhaps for the people of the ancient Macedonian Empire, the conqueror King Iskandar can indeed be regarded as a hero, but for the countries he led his army to invade, this great conqueror king is a demon king who ravaged the people. So now the question is, Tintin-ji-san, according to your previous definition of a hero, then so, is King of Conquerors Iskandar, who appeared as a rider in this Holy Grail war, a hero? When humans are redeemed, they will subconsciously regard the existence that redeemed them as a vision, a yearning, and a hero, no matter what the identity of the Redeemer was, or what kind of existence he was. For the redeemed, he is a so-called hero. Takahashi Makoto looked at Uncle Tintin, who was in deep thought, and continued, since good people can have guardians, then evil people can certainly have saviors. This time, not only Uncle Tintin, but also Eiji Najima fell into deep thought because of the remarks of a certain middle school cartoonist. As cartoonists and gods in the comic world, when creating the comic world, we should abandon the emotions that humans have, and cannot bring our own judgments of good and evil and right and wrong into this world, otherwise. Takahashi Makoto stretched out his hand forward, as if holding something tightly. We will destroy the world created by us. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 652. I don't know whether this is because the brainwashing ability of a certain middle-class manga artist is too cruel, or because Takahashi Makoto has mastered the protagonist's exclusive mouth shield invincibility aura. Ever since that day when I instilled some abnormal knowledge into Eiji Shinzuma and Uncle Tintin, such as heroes are not necessarily partners of justice and those who are classified as evil by humans can also be heroes, the two of them have never been together again. Doubtful, I began to devote all my energy to the comic manuscript. Whether they have doubts or are troubled, after the heroic spirits appear one after another, the brains of Eiji Shinzuma and Uncle Tintin have been completely occupied by the various characters and plots of the heroic spirits, and they no longer have the thought and time to read them one by one as before. Asking a certain middle school cartoonist. The only idea in my mind is to complete the comic draft as soon as possible. Eiji Naizuma is responsible for the combat-related parts of the comic, while Uncle Tintin serves as an assistant to help complete the comic manuscript provided by Makoto Takahashi. Of course, this does not mean that the self-proclaimed world god of the comic fate Makoto Takahashi would be like an overseer supervising the work of slaves, holding a whip and shouting at the side but not working. Rather, quite the opposite. That's right, that's it. Makoto Takahashi, who was also leaning on the table, quickly completed the manga manuscript. Although his face became a little ugly due to long hours of work, no matter the smile on his face, or words of unknown meaning came out of his mouth, at this moment, Takahashi Makoto seemed to be exuding an aura called hot blood. Keep the fighting spirit and consciousness now, Humph, here with the blessing of the state, we will no longer have any opponents ahead. Ha 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 ha. Oh, the video provided by Phoenix Academy teacher, is really valuable for reference. Although he said that he wanted to complete the manga manuscript as soon as possible, Eiji Niizuma was much more leisurely than Uncle Tintin, at least as Tintin. While the uncle was lying hard on the table, carefully adding background or drawing lines to the completed manga manuscript, Eiji Niizuma still had the thought to take out his tablet, observing and commenting, "Oh, this move is super cool." No. Thinking that in reality, the Phoenix Academy teacher can actually do this kind of action, yeah, it's full of reference value. Listening to Eiji Niizuma's emotion, coupled with some of the battle scenes he had witnessed before, Uncle Tintin knew without taking a peek what Eiji Niizuma was looking at. But compared to this, I mean, cartoonists, are they all monsters? Looking at Eiji Shinzuma putting down his tablet from time to time, yelling strangely as he quickly completed the manga draft, and then looking at Makoto Takahashi who was clearly bursting into microcosm over there, Uncle Tintin complained in a low voice with some helplessness, "I draw the comic manuscripts one by one, as if I'm desperate. Speaking of which, Yoshida-kun didn't hurry up. Is it necessary to rush the manuscript so hard? And I'm the only one responsible for this. Part of it, no matter how you look at it, it's enough for a month of serialization, right? Ding ding Ji-san, at this time, how can you stop?" Yes, at this time, we absolutely cannot stop. This is the love for comics. This is a fair statement. So, Tintin Gisang, are you planning to betray us? It is rare that after Uncle Tintin opened his mouth to complain, he was also angrily criticized by Takahashi Makoto and his new wife Eiji at the same time. That's a long way to go. Don't put a normal person like me into your monster camp without permission. Uncle Tintin raised his head and glared at his new wife Eiji and Takahashi Makoto with a black line on his face, complaining with a ruthless mouth, "No, it should be he used an uncle-like caring approach to comfort him. Are you planning to spend the rest of your life just to complete the manga manuscript? Give me a good rest. If you let me go because of such an extreme approach, your body can't bear it, so you have to take a rest and the comics have to stop publishing. Then not only does it make no sense for you to do it now, but from the perspective of the result, it is simply putting the cart before the horse and bringing the blame on yourself." Regardless of the new wife Eiji or Takahashi Makoto, after hearing Uncle Tintin's arrogant words of comfort, the two of them stopped the painting brushes in their hands at the same time, and started to exchange information while looking at each other. In other words, this should have been it was a normal thing, but looking at the two people's reactions, Uncle Ding Ding felt a little creepy. That, I said. After seeing such a scene, Uncle Ding Ding seemed to be startled by the effect of his mouth shield. After being stunned, he involuntarily lowered his volume and continued to speak. After all, judging from the number of manga manuscripts completed so far, Yoshida-kun will definitely be shocked, so, I say it's almost, that's enough, right? Tintin Ji-san said this. Makoto Takahashi raised his arm slightly and shook it, staring at his new wife Eiji with burning eyes. "King of Black Flame, what do you think?" Yes, it is indeed a blessing to have been drawing manga manuscripts for such a long time. Eiji Shinzuma stretched his arms like Takahashi Makoto, and stared at Takahashi Makoto with warlike eyes, but I said reluctantly. "Yes, I feel the same way." Makoto Takahashi put new manuscript paper on the table and picked up the brush again. It is rare to encounter such an occasion. If there is no winner, the god of this world, you must also dislike us, right? So Mr. How win? Nizuma Eiji also sat back on the chair in a weird posture again, picked up the paintbrush and issued a war declaration to Takahashi Makoto, "Let's continue the duel of victory and defeat." In order to complete the battle scene in the comic as soon as possible, Nizuma Eiji ignored his physical fatigue and entered the hot-blooded and belligerent mode again. In order to cooperate with Nizuma Eiji to complete the battle scene, Takahashi Makoto also began to complete the rest of the plot in the comic as desperately as if he was desperate, and once again opened the burning blood state. Is it a competition of completing the comic speed? Or is it a competition of completing the number of comics? No. Neither. This is a contest of wills. This is a collision of consciousness. After all, physical fatigue. But it can't restrain Takahashi Makoto and Nazuma Eiji, which comes from the obsession with victory deep in their souls. After getting too excited, even non-human monsters are just idiots after all. The ignored mortal Uncle Ding Ding looked at the two monster cartoonists who were competing again, and snorted coldly, "Humph. Whether it's Nazuma-kun or Aiken, both guys are idiots, right?" 3 days later, Yoshida, the editor-in-chief who came to Takahashi Makoto's house to collect the comics, saw Takahashi Makoto and Nazuma Eiji lying on the table like corpses, and his face was immediately black. Are these two guys idiots? After asking Uncle Ding Ding and figuring out the whole story, a certain editor-in-chief from the weekly magazine left such a comment and left quickly with a large number of comics. Ahem, a certain cat has been lying in the hospital for a while. It's just a cough and a cold, but it took so long to delay it. It's because I haven't adapted to the human body yet. Sorry, dear readers, a certain cat has only updated now after recovering, and I've kept you waiting for a long time.